Trust me, you won't forget this one. A billionaire's fiancée raised her hand to slap a maid in front of 300 wedding guests. Everyone froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And then, before her palm could land, a hand shot out and grabbed her wrist so hard she gasped in pain. What happened in the next 60 seconds would end an engagement, expose a secret, and change 3 lives forever. But to understand why he did it, you need to go back 6 months, to the day a tired, broke single mother walked into his mansion for a job interview she almost didn't take. Hey friend, welcome back. If this is your first time here, this is the place for real, emotional, true-to-life stories. The kind that stay with you long after the video ends. Quick question before we dive in. What country are you watching from right now? Drop your flag in the comments. I read every single one. This story today involves a slap that never landed, a secret that changed everything, and an ending that might just make you tear up. Let's get into it. Maya Bennett had exactly $43 in her checking account, and she'd already done the math 3 times that morning, hoping it would come out different. It didn't. She stood in her cramped kitchen in a rented duplex on the edge of Charlotte, North Carolina, watching the coffee maker sputter out its last few drops like it too was running on fumes. Outside, the sun hadn't fully risen yet, but Maya had been up since 4:45, the way she was every day. Her daughter, Zoe, was still asleep down the hall, one small foot always managing to escape the blanket no matter how many times Maya tucked it back in. Maya was 29 years old, and some mornings she felt like she'd lived 3 lifetimes already. Her husband had left when Zoe was 2, not dramatically, not with some big fight, just a slow fade into silence and then an empty side of the closet. Maya didn't like to talk about it much. What was there to say? Some people run toward hard things. Some people run away. She'd learned which kind he was the hard way, and she'd learned to stop waiting for him to change. Since then it had been just the 2 of them. Maya worked 2 jobs. Mornings cleaning offices downtown, evenings waiting tables at a diner off Route 9. And somehow, someway she kept a roof over their heads and food on the table and Zoe in a decent enough school. It wasn't easy. It was never easy. But Maya had a kind of quiet strength that people who met her only briefly often mistook for simplicity. They didn't see the woman who did math in her head at 2 a.m., stretching every dollar 3 ways. They didn't see the mother who skipped her own dinner more nights than she'd ever admit, just so Zoe's plate could be a little fuller. That morning, though, something was different. Maya had a job interview. Not for a diner. Not for an office cleaning gig. A real position. Live-in household staff for one of the wealthiest families in the state. Her cousin Renee, who worked catering for high-end events, had heard through a mutual contact that the Ashford estate was hiring, and had practically begged Maya to apply. They pay triple what you're making now, Renee had told her over the phone, practically breathless. And benefits, Maya. Health insurance. For you and Zoe. Health insurance. Maya had almost laughed at the word, the way you laugh at something so far out of reach it stops feeling real. Zoe had asthma, and more times than Maya wanted to remember, an ER visit had wiped out whatever savings she'd managed to scrape together that month. So she'd said yes. She'd borrowed a blazer from Renee, ironed her one good blouse twice, and now here she was, standing in her kitchen with a cup of bad coffee, trying to talk herself into believing she had a shot. The Ashford estate was the kind of place Maya had only ever seen in magazines. Sprawling white columns, gardens that looked more like a resort than someone's backyard, a driveway longer than her entire street. She parked her 10-year-old Honda near the service entrance, smoothed down her blazer and reminded herself to breathe. The woman who greeted her at the door was clipped and efficient, walking Maya through a checklist of duties without much warmth. Housekeeping. Event support. Occasional assistance with Mr. Ashford's schedule when the regular staff was overwhelmed. It was a lot. But Maya had never been afraid of work. What she hadn't expected was to run into William Ashford himself on her way out. He was coming down the main staircase as she crossed the foyer. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking more like someone about to fix a leaking faucet than a man worth 9 figures. Maya had seen his picture once or twice in local news pieces about his company's charity work, but photos hadn't captured the way he actually carried himself. Not arrogant. Almost tired in a way she recognized. "You must be here about the position," he said, stopping a few steps above her. "Sir." "Maya Bennett." She extended a hand, hoping it wasn't shaking. He shook it. His grip was firm, unremarkable, human. "William Ashford. Renee's cousin, right? She's spoken about you." Maya blinked, surprised. "She has." "Good things," he said, and there was the faintest trace of a smile. "Said you were the hardest working person she knew. That's rare coming from Renee. She's not big on compliments." Maya laughed before she could stop herself, and something in her chest loosened just slightly. "I hope I get the chance to prove her right," she said. William studied her for a moment. Not in an uncomfortable way, just like he was actually seeing her, which was more than most people bothered to do these days. "I think you will," he said simply, and continued down the stairs. It was such a small moment. 30 seconds, maybe less. But Maya thought about it the entire drive home, unable to shake the strange, warm feeling that maybe, just maybe, something in her life was finally about to change. She got the call 2 days later. He got the job. What Maya didn't know yet, what she couldn't have known, was that William Ashford was 3 weeks away from announcing his engagement to a woman named Vanessa Croft. And she didn't know that the quiet kindness she just felt from her new employer was about to become the very thing that put a target on her back. Because Vanessa Croft did not like to share attention. And she especially did not like being outshined by the help. 2 months in, and Maya had started to believe the impossible. That this job might actually be the turning point her life had needed for years. The Ashford estate ran like a small, well-oiled machine, and Maya had settled into her role faster than she expected. She managed the East Wing, coordinated with the kitchen staff for smaller gatherings, and occasionally helped William's assistant Priya with scheduling when things got hectic. The pay was steady. The health insurance had already covered one of Zoe's asthma flare-ups without Maya losing sleep over the bill. For the first time in years, Maya wasn't drowning. But something else had started to grow alongside that relief. A quiet respect between her and William that neither of them had planned for. It wasn't romantic. Maya was careful never to let herself think that way, not once. He was her employer and soon to be a married man, and she had far too much at stake to blur that line even in her own head. But there was an ease to their interactions that surprised her. William wasn't like the wealthy families Renee had described from her catering gigs, the ones who treated staff like furniture. He remembered Maya's name from day one. He asked about Zoe. Once, when he noticed Maya limping slightly from a long shift, he'd insisted she take the afternoon off, no questions asked. "You work harder than half my executive team," he told her once, only half joking as she reorganized his study. "And you don't complain once." "Complaining doesn't pay the bills," Maya had said, and he'd laughed. A real laugh, not the polished, practiced one she sometimes heard him use with his business associates. It was in these small, ordinary moments that Maya started to understand something about William Ashford that the tabloids never captured. Underneath the empire, he was lonely. He'd built a fortune out of nothing after his parents' company collapsed when he was in his 20s, clawing his way back with a kind of relentless drive that had left him, by his own admission, without many people he actually trusted. Which was maybe why Vanessa Croft's arrival into his life had seemed on paper like such a good thing. Maya met her for the first time on a Tuesday afternoon, when Vanessa swept into the house in a cloud of expensive perfume and even more expensive designer everything, trailed by an assistant carrying 3 garment bags. She was beautiful in the sharp, curated way of someone who had spent a lifetime being told beauty was currency. And she used it like one. "You're new," Vanessa said, looking Maya up and down with the kind of assessment usually reserved for furniture at an estate sale. "Yes, ma'am." "Maya. I manage the East Wing." Vanessa didn't respond to that. She simply handed Maya one of the garment bags without breaking stride. These need to be pressed and hung by 6. William hates wrinkles. It wasn't the order that bothered Maya. She was used to orders. It was the way Vanessa said it, like Maya wasn't a person capable of understanding basic instructions the first time. Like she needed to be spoken to slowly, carefully, the way you'd talk to a child or a dog. Maya pressed the garments. She hung them by 6. She said nothing. But over the following weeks, a pattern started to emerge. Small, sharp little cuts that Maya began to recognize as intentional. Vanessa would misplace items and blame the staff. She'd change instructions at the last second and act shocked when things weren't done her new, unspoken way. She corrected Maya in front of guests over things that didn't need correcting. Her voice always dipped in that same saccharine, condescending tone. Maya told herself it didn't matter. She needed this job. She'd weathered worse people for less money. She kept her head down, did her work well, and reminded herself every night that Zoe's inhaler was covered now, that there was finally a small cushion in her savings account, that this was worth it. But Vanessa's dislike of her seemed to be deepening into something else. Something Maya couldn't quite name yet but could feel, the way you feel a storm building in the air before the first drop of rain falls. It came to a head one evening when William stopped by the kitchen to thank Maya personally for organizing a surprise dinner for his business partner's retirement. An idea Maya had come up with and executed almost entirely on her own initiative, staying 2 hours past her shift to get every detail right. "This was incredible," William said, genuinely impressed, gesturing at the beautifully set dining room. "You didn't have to go this far." "I wanted to," Maya said simply. "You've been good to me. I like doing good work for good people." William looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly professional, something unreadable crossing his face. "Not everyone would say that after 2 months of Vanessa's instructions," he said almost to himself, and then seemed to catch himself and moved on. But Vanessa had been standing in the doorway. And she had heard every word. That night, alone in his study, William didn't notice the way Vanessa's expression had shifted when she thought no one was looking. The tight, calculating flicker in her eyes as she watched her fiancé thank the maid with a warmth that felt to her disturbingly genuine. Vanessa didn't say anything to William. He didn't need to. She had already decided that Maya Bennett was a problem. And Vanessa Croft did not tolerate problems for long. 3 weeks later, invitations went out for their engagement party. 300 guests, the Ashford Estate Gardens, a night meant to announce to the world that William Ashford had found the woman he was going to marry. Maya had no idea that night would end with Vanessa's hand raised against her, or that everything she thought she understood about her place in that house was about to be shattered. And then everything changed in a single moment. The night of the engagement party was, by every outward measure, perfect. String lights wound through the garden's old oak trees. A 12-piece band played beneath a white tent large enough to hold a wedding. Champagne towers glittered under the early evening sun, and 300 of the wealthiest, most influential people in the state moved through the Ashford estate in silk and tailored suits, laughing the practiced laugh of people who had never once had to check their bank balance before buying groceries. Maya had been assigned to oversee the catering staff and manage any last-minute issues that arose. Invisible as staff were meant to be at events like this, a ghost in a black uniform moving quietly through a world she'd never belonged to. She didn't mind. She was good at being invisible. It was, in its own strange way, a kind of safety. What she minded was the small velvet box. It happened around 8:30 during the toasts. Vanessa's mother had been showing off a family heirloom bracelet earlier that evening, a delicate strand of diamonds that had, according to the story she told anyone who'd listen, been in the family for 3 generations. She'd set it down on a side table near the champagne fountain while she adjusted her wrap, distracted by a conversation, and then swept off toward the dance floor without a second thought. Maya noticed it sitting there, unattended, glinting under the string lights, and did what she always did. She picked it up to bring it to security, to make sure something so valuable didn't get lost or worse, stolen in the chaos of the party. She never made it to security. Vanessa found her first. What? Vanessa said, her voice cutting through the music like a blade. Do you think you're doing? Maya turned, the bracelet still in her open palm, confused. I found this on the table by the fountain. You were just stealing my mother's bracelet, Vanessa said, loud enough that heads nearby began to turn. In front of everyone. At my own engagement party. No, Vanessa, I promise I was bringing it to security. I would never. Don't you dare say my name like we're friends. Vanessa's voice rose further, drawing more eyes, more silence spreading outward through the crowd like ripples in water. Do you have any idea what that bracelet is worth? You people always think no one's watching. You people. The words landed like a slap on their own, and Maya felt her face go hot, felt 300 pairs of eyes swinging toward her, felt the particular suffocating shame of being accused of something she hadn't done, in front of everyone who mattered, with absolutely no way to defend herself that anyone would believe. I didn't take anything, Maya said, quieter now, her voice shaking. I would never. Save it. Vanessa stepped closer, and something in her face had shifted into something colder, something that had clearly been waiting weeks for exactly this kind of opportunity. You've been sniffing around William since the day you walked into this house. Don't think I haven't noticed. Don't think I don't see exactly what you're trying to do here. The crowd had gone almost completely silent now, the band trailing off awkwardly, guests turning with the particular hunger people have for watching someone else's humiliation. Maya opened her mouth to respond, to explain, to defend herself. But before she could get a single word out, Vanessa's hand shot upward, sharp and sudden, aimed directly at Maya's face. Maya flinched, closing her eyes, bracing for the impact. It never came. A hand closed around Vanessa's wrist mid-swing, gripping hard enough that Vanessa gasped in pain and stumbled slightly off balance. Say another word, William said, his voice low and utterly cold, a version of him Maya had never heard before, and I will end this engagement right here in front of every single person you invited. The garden had gone completely, deathly silent. 300 guests stood frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their mouths, watching the man they'd come to celebrate hold his fiancée's wrist in an iron grip, his face carved from something hard and furious. William, Vanessa said, her voice suddenly small, suddenly aware of every eye on her. She was stealing my mother's bracelet. I saw it in her hand. I saw the whole thing, William said. I've been standing right there for the last 2 minutes. She picked it up off the table to bring it to security. Exactly like she's supposed to. Exactly like anyone with basic decency would do. Vanessa's face went pale, then red, humiliation and fury warring across her features in front of everyone she'd invited to witness her triumph that night. You're taking her side, she hissed. Over mine? Over your fiancé. William released her wrist slowly, deliberately, and turned to look at Maya, whose hands were still shaking, the bracelet still clutched in her palm like evidence of a crime she hadn't committed. Maya, he said, his voice gentling instantly, are you all right? Maya couldn't answer right away. Her throat had closed around something she didn't have a name for yet. Not quite gratitude, not quite shock, something rawer and more complicated than either. And that was when Priya, William's assistant, came rushing across the lawn, pale and out of breath, clutching her phone. William, she said, you need to see this. Now. She turned the phone screen toward him. It was security footage from earlier that evening. Footage that showed with perfect clarity Vanessa herself removing the bracelet from her mother's wrist an hour before the toasts began, and setting it deliberately on the side table near the fountain, glancing around twice to make sure no one was watching her do it. William stared at the screen for a long moment, and when he looked back up at Vanessa, something in his expression had gone permanently, irreversibly cold. You planted it, he said quietly. You set her up. The garden held its breath. Vanessa said nothing at all. She had nothing left to say, Or rather, everything to say and no way to say it that wouldn't make things worse. The party didn't end so much as it dissolved. Guests began slipping away in uncomfortable clusters, murmuring behind cupped hands, the band packing up their instruments in a hurry that suggested even they wanted no part of what had just unfolded in front of 300 witnesses. Vanessa's mother had gone white and silent, clutching her bracelet like it had personally betrayed her. Maya stood frozen near the fountain for a long time after it was over, her heart still hammering, the bracelet finally handed off to security where it should have gone in the first place. She felt strangely exposed, humiliated in front of everyone, even though she'd done nothing wrong, even though the truth had come out. Some kinds of shame don't wash off just because you're proven innocent. They linger in your skin. William found her 20 minutes later, sitting alone on a stone bench at the edge of the garden, far from the last of the departing guests. "Are you okay?" he asked again, softer this time, sitting down beside her without asking permission, close enough to be present but far enough to respect the space she clearly needed. "I don't know," Maya said honestly. "I've never been accused of something like that before. In front of that many people. I keep thinking about how fast it could have gone the other way. If you hadn't seen it happen. If Priya hadn't had that footage." Her hands were still trembling slightly. "People would have believed her. Not me." William didn't argue because he knew she was right, and it was that honesty, his refusal to comfort her with an easy lie, that told Maya more about his character than almost anything else had. "I should have seen this coming sooner," he said instead, staring out at the dimming garden. "She's been doing things like this for months. Small things. I told myself it was just difficult personality stuff. Stress from the wedding planning. I didn't want to see it because seeing it meant admitting I'd made a mistake." "You don't owe me an explanation," Maya said. "I think I do," William said. "Because tonight wasn't the first time she made your life harder. It was just the first time I actually paid attention." They sat in silence for a while, the last of the string lights flickering against the darkening sky. "There's something else," William said finally, and something in his voice made Maya turn to look at him. "Priya found more than just tonight's footage. Vanessa's been. There've been some discrepancies. Money moving out of accounts connected to the wedding fund. Payments to someone I don't recognize. I don't fully understand it yet, but it doesn't look good. It looks like she's been planning something for a while." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "William, I don't want to be involved in." "You're not involved," he said quickly. I needed to say it out loud to someone who isn't a lawyer or a PR consultant telling me how to spin this for the press tomorrow morning." He rubbed a hand over his face, and for a moment, the billionaire vanished entirely, replaced by a tired, disappointed man sitting on a garden bench at the end of a terrible night. "I built an empire out of nothing because I learned young how to spot people who were only interested in what I had, not who I was. I thought I'd gotten better at seeing it. Turns out I still have blind spots." "You're allowed to be wrong about people," Maya said quietly. "It doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human." William looked at her then, something shifting in his expression. Not romantic, not yet, but something that looked a lot like recognition. Like he was seeing clearly for the first time, the quiet strength that had been standing in his house for months, doing the hardest work without ever asking for credit. "Renee was right about you," he said finally. Maya managed a small, tired smile. "She's not usually wrong." Over the following 2 days the full picture came into focus, piece by ugly piece. Vanessa had accumulated significant gambling debts over the past year, debts she'd kept hidden from everyone, including William. She'd been quietly siphoning money from accounts tied to the wedding budget, planning to disappear the difference before anyone noticed, betting, correctly for a while, that no one would think to check. The bracelet incident, Priya eventually pieced together, hadn't been random cruelty. Vanessa had grown paranoid that Maya, with her access to William's schedule and correspondence, might stumble across the financial irregularities before the wedding took place. Humiliating and firing her. under the guise of a theft accusation, would have solved two problems at once: removing a threat and eliminating someone she'd grown jealous of in equal measure. William called off the engagement the next morning. Quietly, without a public statement, without drama. Just a decision made and executed with the same clear-eyed resolve that had built his company from nothing. Vanessa left the estate that afternoon, and though she tried twice to reach William by phone in the days that followed, he never answered. Maya, meanwhile, went home to Zoe that night and held her daughter a little tighter than usual, unsure yet what any of this meant for her own future, grateful for the truth but bracing herself quietly for whatever came next. She had no idea that William was about to make a decision that would change both their lives forever. One that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with the kind of person he'd finally realized she was. The morning the letter arrived, Maya almost didn't open it, figuring at first that it was simply another bill she wasn't ready to face. It had been 3 weeks since the engagement party. Life at the estate had settled into something quieter, steadier, without the sharp undercurrent of tension Vanessa's presence had always carried. William had thrown himself into work and Maya had gone back to her routine. Mornings with the household staff, evenings home with Zoe, the two of them slowly rebuilding a small, ordinary kind of peace. But the envelope sitting on her kitchen table that morning wasn't a bill. It was from William's office, hand-delivered by Priya the evening before with a simple instruction. He wants you to read this alone. Inside was a letter, and beneath it, a folder of documents Maya didn't fully understand at first glance. The letter was short. Maya, I've thought a lot about the last few months and about what happened at the party. I keep coming back to the same thought. You have spent nearly a year making my life better, quietly, without ever asking for anything in return, while someone I trusted spent that same year trying to take things from me. That's not a small thing. That's character. And I don't think people like you get thanked for it nearly often enough. So here's what I've decided. Zoe's medical file came up during the insurance review last month. I hope you don't mind that Priya flagged it to me. She was worried about you. I know what it's like to grow up without a safety net, watching your parents do the math on things that shouldn't require math. I've set up a trust for Zoe's ongoing care, fully separate from your salary, no strings attached, no expectations. It's already been arranged with your insurance provider. You'll also find paperwork for a promotion, head of household operations, effective immediately with the raise and benefits that come with it. This isn't charity and it isn't guilt. It's overdue recognition for someone who earned it. Thank you for reminding me what integrity actually looks like at a time I badly needed the reminder. William. Maya read the letter twice, then a third time, her hands trembling in a way that had nothing to do with fear this time. She thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago, $43 in her account, borrowing a blazer for an interview she almost didn't take, doing math at 2 a.m. that never seemed to come out right. She thought about every night she'd gone without dinner so Zoe's plate could be fuller, every year bill that had felt like a door slamming shut on some future she couldn't quite picture yet. And she thought too about the moment in the garden, Vanessa's hand raised, the silence, the fear, and how close she'd come to losing everything over a lie someone else had told about her. That evening Maya drove to the estate not because she'd been asked to, but because some things need to be said in person. She found William in his study, reading over what looked like quarterly reports, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. You didn't have to do this, Maya finally said, holding up the folder. I know, William said. That's kind of the point. I don't need saving, Maya said, and there was no anger in it, just quiet honesty. I've never needed saving. I've been taking care of Zoe and myself for years and I'll keep doing it with or without this. I know that too, William said, setting down the reports, giving her his full attention. This isn't about saving you, Maya. It's about finally seeing someone clearly and deciding to do right by them. There's a difference. You were never the one who needed to change in this story. Everyone else around you did. Maya felt something in her chest loosen. Not gratitude exactly, though there was plenty of that too, but something closer to being seen fully and without agenda, maybe for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Zoe's going to want to thank you herself," Maya said, her voice a little rough. "She's been asking why I keep crying happy tears all day." William smiled. A real one, unguarded. "Tell her she doesn't owe me anything. None of you do." Maya thought in that moment about the mini hook she'd have used if her own life were a story. And then, everything changed in a single moment. Except she realized now that wasn't quite true. Nothing had changed in a single moment. It had changed slowly, quietly, in 100 small acts of decency that had been happening all along, invisible to almost everyone the way real character usually is. She didn't fall in love with William that night, and this isn't that kind of story. What grew between them over the following year was something steadier and rarer. A friendship built on mutual respect, on two people who'd both learned the hard way what it looked like when someone finally treated you like you mattered. Whatever came after that came slowly and honestly and on its own time. But the lesson Maya carried with her long after that engagement party faded into memory was simpler than any romance. The way people treat someone who can do nothing for them in return tells you everything about who they really are. Vanessa had seen Maya as an obstacle. William had seen her as a person. That difference in the end was the only thing that had ever really mattered. To anyone watching this story who's ever felt invisible, underestimated, or unfairly judged by people who never bothered to actually see you, hold on. The truth has a way of catching up. And the right people, when they finally do see you clearly, will make sure the world sees you too. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If it moved you even a little, I hope you carry a piece of it with you today. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine while I told it, hit that like button. It genuinely means the world to this channel. If you want more real, emotional stories like Maya and William's every single week, go ahead and subscribe because we're just getting started. I'd love to know, what part of this story hit you hardest? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that good people are still out there, someone who's ever felt overlooked or unfairly judged, send them this video today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.